They said he wouldn't survive the night, not with a shattered leg, no signal, and wolves closing in. But no one expected a wild Mustang to appear from the shadows. No one imagined that this untamed creature, scarred and free, would become his protector. In the heart of the Wyoming wilderness, where man and nature rarely meet as equals, a broken deputy and a nameless stallion formed a silent bond that would change both their lives and perhaps inspire yours. The sun over Larkspur, Wyoming, burned low and golden, casting long shadows across the endless sprawl of high plains and sagebrush. It was late summer, the kind where the heat lingered in the dust and the wind carried the scent of dry grass and distant thunder. Storm clouds, bruised and heavy, gathered far to the east, but for now, the sky above remained a blue so vast it made a man feel like a pinprick against God's canvas. Cole Hargrove, 39, sat astride a battered ATV, its engine ticking quietly after the ride. He had the kind of face that once looked boyish, but had been chiseled hard by years on the job. Square jawline, deep-set eyes the color of old copper, and short brown hair hidden beneath a sweat-stained sheriff's cap. His build was solid and athletic, though stiffer now, a result of injuries collected through service rather than sport. The lines around his eyes weren't just from the sun, they came from long nights and harder memories. Cole had served as deputy sheriff for 12 years, a steady figure in the quiet town of Larkspur. The town sat nestled between the folds of open prairie and dusty ridges, its population barely topping 800 souls. People knew each other's dogs and argued over the same bar stools they'd sat on for decades. It was a peaceful place, until 6 months ago, when Cole pulled the trigger during a domestic disturbance call and ended the life of a mentally unstable veteran who'd lunged at a neighbor with a kitchen knife. He hadn't wanted to. It didn't matter. The town had grieved, the family had forgiven, but Cole hadn't. Not really. That moment replayed in his mind every night over the sound of crickets and the clink of melting ice in a glass. That was why he'd come out here, to clear his head, to find some silence the wind couldn't reach inside. He didn't tell anyone he was going. He just packed a day's supply of water, a sidearm, and rode east into the wild stretch of Thunder Basin. He needed space. He needed to stop feeling like he was slowly crumbling beneath the weight of his badge. The trail had started smooth, a mix of dusty earth and scattered rock, with clumps of rabbit brush crowding the path. But now, as the ridgeline narrowed and sloped sharply, Cole could feel the ground becoming treacherous. He slowed, squinting into the sun. One wrong move here, and the land wouldn't forgive him. His mistake came in the form of a loose shale bed hidden under dry grass. The front tires of the ATV hit it just wrong, and before he could react, the world tilted. There was a metallic screech, a stomach-lurching jolt, and then he was tumbling. Air, dust, noise, then silence. When he opened his eyes, he tasted blood. His mouth was full of grit. Pain screamed from his left leg, and when he tried to move, something inside it crackled horribly. The ATV lay nearby, upside down like a dead beetle. A sharp boulder had torn through the side panel. One rear wheel still spun, useless. Cole's breath came shallow, laced with panic and the rising scent of blood and gasoline. He reached down and touched his thigh. Warm, sticky, broken, definitely, maybe worse. He tried his radio. Dead. His phone? No service. The last tower was 20 miles west, and no one knew where he'd gone. He hadn't told a soul. The silence was complete, except for the low whistle of wind and the distant croak of a raven. He shouted, once. It echoed hollow and vanished into the rocks. Cole gritted his teeth. He knew shock was setting in. He'd taught this stuff. Stay warm. Stop the bleeding. Stay alert. Don't panic. But panic slithered in anyway, cold and sharp. He was slipping into the fog of pain when he heard it, a sound so alien, so out of place, it jolted his heart. The measured heavy clop of hooves on rock. He opened his eyes. The horizon blurred, then cleared, and then he saw it. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, a trick of light, fever, and fear, but it was real. A Mustang, not just any horse. This one stood tall and proud, its chest broad and powerful, legs strong and dusted with trail dust. Its coat shimmered like flame, copper red with streaks of gold where the sun hit it. Its mane was tangled and wild, and a long white scar sliced diagonally across the bridge of its nose, giving it the appearance of a warrior long tested. Its eyes were deep, dark, and unblinking. It didn't whinny or bolt. It simply stood there, 10 feet from him, as though evaluating whether Cole was a threat or something else entirely. Cole blinked, unsure if it would run, but the Mustang didn't move. His lips cracked as he tried to whisper, "Hey there, fella!" His voice was hoarse, weak, useless. The horse tilted its head, and then, slowly, deliberately, it took a step forward.
The Mustang did not flee. It stood still beneath the swaying silhouette of a wind-blown pinyon tree, eyes fixed on Cole with a gaze that felt too knowing for a wild thing. Its nostrils flared slightly as it breathed in his scent, blood, sweat, and desperation. The storm clouds had crept closer, darkening the sky with the steady hush of a coming front, but the horse didn't seem concerned. It was as if it lived within the rhythm of storms and sun alike. Cole tried to sit up further, pain cracking through his thigh like glass under pressure. His breaths were shallow, his lips dry. What are you doing here?" he rasped, as if expecting an answer. The horse lowered its head slightly, ears forward, alert but not aggressive. Cole thought it would bolt, but then, to his disbelief, it did something entirely unexpected. It took another step forward. He blinked. It was hard to tell in the fading light, but the Mustang's scar seemed to catch what little sunlight remained, a pale mark etched across its nose like an old wound that had never fully faded. Its coat, rich red like smoldering coals, twitched with every gust of wind. Then, without warning, it turned and disappeared behind a scrub of brush. Cole sank back, head against the dirt. "Just my mind playing tricks," he muttered. Blood loss, dehydration. He closed his eyes, but moments later, there came the sound of hooves again. He opened them just in time to see the Mustang return, something long and green dangling from its mouth. It dropped the thing, a bundle of green grass, torn up by the roots, at his side, then stood, watching. Cole frowned. "Are you feeding me now?" The horse did it again. Left, returned, this time with something different, dry prairie leaves, and this time a dripping clump of moss. Cole stared at it. He recognized the moss. It only grew near water. His heart jolted. Was the horse bringing water to him? It made no sense, but neither did any of this. As if to confirm the impossible, the Mustang stepped forward, placed the moss beside him gently, then backed away. Cole reached with trembling fingers, squeezing the moss until a few precious drops ran down into his cracked lips. He tasted dampness, earth, life. He began to cry without meaning to. 30 miles west, the air conditioning in the small veterinary clinic of Larkspur hummed with indifference as June Meredith, 35, stood staring at the empty clipboard in her hand. June was slender but wiry, with sun-freckled arms, sandy blonde hair always pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail, and eyes the color of summer sage, sharp, perceptive, and deeply tired. She wore faded jeans, a plaid shirt rolled to the sleeves, and scuffed boots crusted with dirt from the last house call she'd made out in Sage Creek. People in town knew her as the girl who could talk down a spooked stallion and hold her own in a bar argument, but few remembered how close she had once been to Deputy Cole Hargrove. Fewer still knew the two had been more than friends once. Years ago, back before Cole buried himself in the job and let duty replace intimacy. June hadn't spoken to him much since the shooting. He'd stopped returning calls, gone quiet, but she still noticed when he didn't show up at morning coffee. Or when the Tuesday patrol shift, he always took past without his truck outside. Now, on the second day of his absence, something in her gut told her this wasn't just another cold disappearance. She picked up the phone and called the sheriff's office. A young deputy named Elijah Rourke, 24, all fresh nerves and crisp uniforms, answered. He was polite, too polite, the kind of person still believing order came from rulebooks. June knew better. "Elijah, this is June." Cole missed another shift. "Yes, ma'am," he said, but he left a note. Said he needed time off. "No, a destination? Just heading east for quiet." "That's it." June's jaw tightened. Did anyone think to ask where east? There was hesitation on the line. "No one thought he wouldn't come back, Miss Meredith. He does this sometimes." "He doesn't miss radio check-ins," she snapped. Silence. "I'm going out there," she said. "Ma'am, that's—" "I'm not asking." She hung up. Outside, her truck idled. In the passenger seat sat a German shepherd mix named Wren, 5 years old, dark brindle coat, one torn ear, and the focused eyes of a dog who had once belonged to a search and rescue team. June had adopted Wren after his handler, her old mentor, had passed. The dog was retired, but not useless. June opened the passenger door. "Let's go find the idiot." Wren barked once, low and certain. Back in the ravine, the wind picked up. Cole had drifted in and out of semi-consciousness, his thoughts loose as threads in a gale. He awoke again to the Mustang nudging his side, not violently but firmly. It let out a short huff, then stepped back, eyes still fixed on him. Cole pushed himself upright with a groan. The pain hadn't gone anywhere. "You try to move me now," he whispered. The horse stomped once, then turned and walked toward the low brush again. It looked back once, ears forward. Cole squinted. It wanted him to follow. That was insane. But insanity, it seemed, was the one currency he had in abundance. He gritted his teeth and began dragging himself, inch by inch, toward the spot where the horse had disappeared. Blood darkened the fabric of his jeans, and his breath came hard, but the will that had built itself from years of surviving dark nights and broken dreams now latched onto a single idea. If the horse hadn't left him yet, maybe it wasn't planning to. The first warning was the wind. It had shifted from warm and dry to sharp and restless, tugging at the grass with frantic fingers. Overhead, the sky that had been stretched wide and cloudless earlier in the day was now a ceiling of rolling charcoal, the light gone dim and electric. Cole Hargrove lay half-sitting against a slope of rock and earth, his injured leg bandaged roughly with strips torn from his undershirt, sweat already soaking through as fever pulsed deep in his bones. The wild Mustang had vanished again. Cole wasn't sure how long he'd been alone this time. Minutes or an hour, maybe more, but the absence left a hole wider than he'd expected. The pain in his leg had grown worse, sharp and hot, and his throat burned with thirst. He tried to move earlier, dragging himself a few feet toward a crooked outcrop, but the strain nearly blacked him out. So he'd stayed still, listening to the wind as the storm gathered its breath. He had survived worse, or so he told himself. Years ago, before the badge, he had been a soldier. Not the kind who wore medals or spoke about tours, but the kind who came back with shadows clinging under his ribs. The Afghan desert had taught him the sound of wind before an ambush, the hollow echo of fear under silence. Now, here in Wyoming's empty wild, the same kind of hush was building. Then came the second warning, a distant howl. Hi, cold. Not one voice, but several. Wolves. Cole's hand instinctively moved toward the sidearm, strapped beneath his jacket. Standard issue, dusty and heavy, but his grip was weak, fingers slow. He knew he couldn't fire more than once without dropping it. Not in this state. The howls came again, closer this time, and he felt the old training tighten in his chest. Not fear, calculation. He scanned the edges of his ravine shelter, looking for movement. And that's when the horse returned. Ash, the red-coated Mustang, emerged at a sharp angle from the north ridge, his body gleaming even in the dim light. His nostrils flared wide. His ears were flat, his head low, and every muscle in his body was pulled taut like a coiled spring. He had seen them. He had smelled the blood. And he did not run. Cole blinked through sweat-smeared vision. "You're back," he muttered. Ash didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on the brush above. Then, from the rim of the ravine, movement. A shape, gray and lean, appeared against the skyline. Then another. 3, then 5. Wolves, drawn by scent and silence. The lead wolf stepped forward, large and dark, with a narrow snout and yellow eyes. It sniffed the air, lips twitching slightly. They hadn't attacked, yet, but Cole knew how fast that could change. He braced, raising the pistol. His finger hovered over the trigger. But before he could fire, Ash reared. With a violent surge, the Mustang rose on his hind legs and slammed both hooves against the rock, a sound like thunder cracking stone. The noise echoed through the ravine, loud, sharp, unnatural. The wolves startled. Ash didn't stop. He struck again, scraping stone with his hooves, sending sparks and dust flying. His mane whipped with the wind, and he let out a shrill, furious scream. The sound so primal and piercing it made Cole's skin crawl. The wolves retreated a step. The lead wolf gave a growl, low and uncertain. Ash didn't charge them, but he didn't yield either. He stepped sideways, positioning himself squarely between Cole and the wolves, body poised for violence. After a long, tense pause, the pack began to withdraw, slowly at first, then with growing speed. Within a minute, they were gone, vanished into the whispering grass like ghosts on padded feet. Ash stood still for several seconds more, then turned his head, just slightly, to glance back at Cole. And Cole, utterly spent, dropped the gun and closed his eyes. Miles away, June Meredith tightened her jacket against the rising wind. She had parked her truck on a gravel trail where the sagebrush grew high and the road gave way to raw grassland. The storm was rolling in fast now, dragging with it the thick scent of ozone and dust. She looked down at Wren, the brindle shepherd mix trotting beside her, his ears alert. "Smell anything?" she asked quietly. Wren paused, nose twitching, then whined once and started veering off the trail toward a rocky incline. She followed without hesitation, adjusting the rifle slung across her shoulder. Not because she expected danger, but because the wild didn't care about expectations. The terrain was uneven, and thunder rolled low in the distance like some ancient creature awakening. She thought about Cole, about the time he broke his silence and came to her doorstep after the shooting, face drawn, hands shaking. He didn't say much, just stood there. She remembered how she hugged him anyway. June had never stopped loving him. She just learned to carry it quietly. Back in the ravine, the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Ash nosed at the ground, then turned toward a narrow rock overhang partially hidden beneath a scrub of juniper. He moved with urgency now, walking to the entrance and looking back. Cole, groggy and half-lucid, watched as the horse seemed to beckon him. "You want me to go there?" he murmured. Ash stomped once, then took 2 steps toward him. Cole understood, or thought he did. He dragged himself inch by inch toward the shelter, every movement like fire. Ash walked beside him, just far enough to offer presence, not pressure. The overhang was low but dry. Once Cole made it inside, the horse stood at the mouth of the small shelter, tail flicking as rain began to lash the ground outside. Inside, Cole leaned against the cool stone wall and let the storm speak. In that cave, he remembered Afghanistan, the ambush that left half his unit dead, the hours trapped beneath rubble, the cries in the dark, the same helplessness he felt now, and the same guilt for surviving. But now, the silence was broken not by screams, but by the steady sound of the storm and the occasional snort from a horse who refused to leave. Ash didn't touch him, didn't move closer, but he stayed, and that was enough. Morning broke over Thunder Basin with a silver haze. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick with the smell of wet earth and juniper. Mist clung low to the hills, softening the jagged edges of the landscape. In the narrow overhang where Cole Hargrove lay curled, his skin clammy with fever and his breath shallow, the silence was almost holy. Ash, the red Mustang, stood just outside, still as a statue, tail flicking softly. Cole stirred, his eyes heavy with sleep and pain. His leg throbbed beneath the crude wrappings, the wound inflamed and his body aching from the strain. He was weak but alive, and somewhere deep in the fog of his mind, the memory of the night returned. Not just the wolves or the storm, but the image of Ash standing between him and the dark. "Still here," Cole whispered, voice barely audible. "You're still here." Ash didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. Then, slowly, the horse stepped forward and lowered his head, nipping gently at the strap of Cole's weather-beaten backpack. The movement was purposeful. Ash pulled at once, released, then looked back at him. Then again, more insistently. Cole blinked. What are you trying to do?" The horse tugged once more at the pack, then stepped back and took a few paces toward the thinning tree line that bordered the ravine. He looked over his shoulder, waiting. It hit Cole then, not just as instinct but as understanding. Ash wasn't just staying. He was trying to lead him somewhere. Cole gathered what little strength remained and reached for the edge of the rock. Every movement was pain, but he grit his teeth. With a grimace, he pulled himself into a crawling position, slinging the pack onto his back with difficulty. Ash waited, patient, a silhouette against the rising light. Meanwhile, 20 miles west, Deputy Wyatt Lorne peered out the windshield of the county search helicopter with sharp eyes and a grim jaw. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, a wiry build honed from years of field work. His face was carved by sun and wind, with close-cropped gray-brown hair and a deep scar near his temple, earned from a standoff gone wrong a decade ago. Wyatt was known as practical, skeptical, and loyal to a fault. Today, he was the only one willing to believe June's gut. "This is a long shot," he muttered into the headset. June Meredith sat beside him, buckled in tight. Her eyes scanned the ground below, focused, determined. "It's more than that. I found fresh tracks." His ATV veered off toward the south ridge. Wren, the brindle German shepherd mix, lay between their boots, ears alert even over the thrum of the blades. Wyatt glanced at June. "You really think he's alive out there?" June didn't answer for a moment. Then, "I'd know if he wasn't." They circled lower, the helicopter tilting as it passed over scattered buttes and open grasslands, now glistening under post-storm light. The landscape was massive, unforgiving, and easy to disappear in. "Hold on," June said suddenly, leaning forward. "Circle back. I think I saw movement there by that sparse copse of junipers." Wyatt swung them around, and that's when they saw it. Back on the ground, Cole was inching forward, each foot of progress earned with gritted teeth and sheer will. Ash moved ahead, pausing often, looking back with what could only be described as expectation. The trail they followed wound up out of the ravine into a patch of uneven terrain, where the trees grew thinner and gave way to clearer views of the basin below. Cole's breath came ragged. His hand brushed the side pocket of his pack, the emergency flare, the last one. His fingers trembled as he pulled it free. He stopped near a flat rise where the wind kissed the grass in his soft waves. Ash stood still beside him. Cole glanced up into the sky, hoping, doubting, praying, and then he lit it. With a hiss and a flash of red, the flare ignited, spilling crimson smoke into the air like blood rising to heaven. Cole planted it upright into the dirt, letting the wind carry the signal far across the basin. Minutes passed, then 10. He dropped to his elbows, exhausted, watching the smoke spiral like a prayer. Ash remained beside him, unmoving. Then, from far above, the thudding chop of a helicopter. Cole blinked hard against the brightness, tears of disbelief stinging his eyes. The sound grew louder. Dust lifted from the clearing. Ash let out a low whinny and backed away a few paces as the wind picked up. Cole turned his head weakly to the sky, and above him, a shape emerged, a white and green rescue chopper hovering in descent. Through the side window, he caught a glimpse of a familiar face. June leaned over Wyatt's shoulder. "There, by the flare." "I see him," Wyatt confirmed. "We're setting down." As the skids touched the ground, June was already unbuckling. She jumped out, boots hitting dirt hard, and Wren leapt down beside her. She ran. Cole was lying flat, barely conscious, his eyes fluttering. His lips cracked into the faintest smile. "Hey," he croaked. "Took you long enough." June dropped beside him, her hands already on his pulse. "You stubborn idiot," she whispered, tears catching in her throat. "You made it." "I had help," Cole rasped. His gaze shifted, but Ash was gone. The chopper's rotors kicked up a storm of dust as the rescue team loaded Cole onto the stretcher. June held his hand the whole time, her fingers tight around his, her other hand stroking the back of Wren's neck to keep the shepherd calm amidst the noise. Cole was drifting in and out, lips pale, fever cresting, but he never let go of her. As they lifted him into the helicopter, he turned his head weakly, scanning the open ridge one last time. Ash was gone. Not galloping, not startled, not wild-eyed. Just absent, like smoke that had once been flame. By the time they reached Larkspur County Medical, the town had already started whispering. Cole awoke to sterile light and the rhythmic beep of heart monitors. The scent of antiseptic replaced the prairie wind, and outside the window, the storm that had nearly taken his life had passed days ago. His leg was wrapped in layers of gauze and bracing, elevated slightly, his arm hooked to an foreline. He blinked against the haze of medication, and when his vision cleared, June was sitting in the chair beside him. She was dressed simply, jeans and a clean flannel shirt, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. The lines around her eyes had deepened from sleeplessness. She looked older than she had a week ago. Wiser, too. "You're in the hospital," she said softly, standing to pour him a glass of water. "You've been here 2 days. Infection's under control. You're stable." He took the cup with trembling hands and drank. "I saw him again," he whispered. June didn't ask who. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a thin black cord with a tiny body cam clipped to it, standard issue for field medics in airborne rescue. She turned the screen toward him and pressed play. A still shot appeared, red smoke rising from the clearing, and just behind it, partially obscured by haze, was a silhouette, a wild horse, head raised high, tail catching the wind, standing at full attention. "Is that?" June nodded. He waited until the rotors came in, then disappeared over the ridge. "You weren't hallucinating, Cole." Cole stared at the image. "They're already calling him the Silent Flame of Larkspur," she added, with a slight, bemused smile. News of the strange rescue spread quickly, but most people didn't know what to believe. A wild Mustang guarding an injured man for days? Feeding him? Guiding him? It bordered on legend. Still, the press caught wind of the footage. The photo taken from June's body cam was shared online. The Larkspur Gazette ran it with the headline, "Mystery Mustang appears, vanishes after saving deputy." Some dismissed it, others believed, but few knew what it had meant. At the edge of town, near the foothills where ranchland met forest, lived Ansel Bright, 68, a retired wrangler and Mustang advocate known for his weathered hat, tobacco-stained fingers, and eyes like cracked blue glass. Ansel had worked wild horses for decades, and now ran a sanctuary for older rescues. He was a man of few words, but carried the air of someone who'd seen the land change and forgave it anyway. He came to visit Cole a few days after the article broke. "You saw him up close?" Ansel asked from the foot of the hospital bed, voice deep and gravelly. Cole nodded. Scar across the nose. Fire-colored coat. Smart. Too smart. Ansel rubbed his beard. "That one's been seen before. Couple ranchers called him Devil Red. Said he couldn't be caught. Tore through 3 fences once just to free a trapped mare." Cole smiled faintly. "Sounds like him." Ansel took off his hat, holding it against his chest. "You're lucky he chose you." Back in the wilds, no one knew where Ash had gone. Some trackers went looking, drawn by curiosity or opportunity. No one found him, but others swore they spotted him near twilight, standing still on high ridge lines, watching the town with unreadable eyes. Never close, never for long. Cole was released from the hospital a week later. His leg was still in a brace. He walked with crutches, but he felt different, lighter, somehow. Not healed, but aware of something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose without armor. He returned to the trailhead days after being discharged, not to find Ash, but to sit where they'd met. To remember. June joined him that evening, bringing coffee in a thermos and a rolled-up newspaper. She handed it to him. On the front page was a sketch someone had made based on the body cam image, a striking depiction of Ash, rearing on a ridge, eyes like embers. "They're naming the new wildlife corridor after him," June said. "State approved it this morning." Cole looked down at the name, the Ash Hollow Preserve. He smiled. Fitting. June leaned on her elbows beside him. "You think we'll ever see him again?" "I don't know," he said, "but I think he'll know if we deserve it." The winds across the Ash Hollow Preserve carried the scent of wild sage and warm grass. Summer had deepened its hold on Wyoming, gilding the rolling prairies in shades of gold and green. The sky was enormous, brilliant, and cloudless, and the kind of quiet that wrapped around a person like an old quilt settled over the land. Cole Hargrove leaned against the railing of a newly installed overlook near the preserve's western boundary. A wooden sign below him read, Ash Hollow, Protected Mustang Range, Wildlife Observation Point. His leg, still stiff on colder mornings, was finally healing without the sharp pain that had haunted him for weeks. He wore a ranger's field uniform now, lightweight canvas, dusty boots, a battered felt hat pulled low against the sun. His badge had changed too. No longer silver with a Larkspur Sheriff star, but a circular emblem carved with the silhouette of a horse's head over mountains and grassland. Conservation Supervisor, Ash Hollow Unit. He never imagined he'd end up here. He had walked away from law enforcement with less regret than expected and more clarity than he thought possible. He still carried scars, not just on his leg, but in places that didn't bruise. But the wilderness had given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a chance to belong without controlling. June Meredith approached from the trail behind, her frame lithe and relaxed, clipboard in hand. She wore a ponytail beneath her baseball cap, cheeks kissed pink by the sun, and her dog Wren trotted beside her with a limp tail wag and tongue lolling. The brindle shepherd had taken to the land like he'd been born for it, retrained with quiet joy as a wildlife detection dog under June's careful guidance. June's voice was soft but teasing. You gonna keep staring out there like a myth chaser, or help me with the fence inventory? Cole didn't turn. He was real. You saw him. Uh-huh, she smiled, stopping beside him. Just checking you hadn't started seeing him in the clouds now, too. They shared a laugh, small and warm, the kind that came from time healing more than wounds. Their relationship had taken cautious steps at first, coffee shared without expectations, a walk with Wren that turned into dinner on the porch. Now, weeks in, they lived in quiet rhythm, finding a new kind of peace that didn't ask for more than presence. Hey, she added, softer now, tapping her pen against the clipboard. You remember that reporter from the Wild Call magazine? Cole groaned. The one who wanted to write about Ash like he was a spirit of the plains? She's coming back next week. Wants to do a piece on the preserve now. Says your story sparked a whole advocacy campaign out in Nevada. He chuckled. That horse is going to get more press than I ever did in uniform. You might. Cole looked at her and shook his head gently. Not anymore. That evening, Cole took one of the outer loops alone. The air had cooled to a soft breeze, cicadas buzzed in the tall grass, and the prairie rolled gently like a sleeping beast. He carried a small notebook, jotting notes on fencing gaps, scat sightings, and grass density, things that mattered now more than arrests or warrants ever had. He crested a low ridge, paused for water, and when he looked up, there he was. Ash stood across the valley, near a rise where the sunlight dipped and burned against the wild oats. He was still flame-colored, wild-maned, and proud. The white scar across his nose caught the light like a forgotten story. He hadn't aged visibly, though time had passed. Cole didn't move, didn't call. He knew better now. Ash turned his head, locking eyes with him. There was no fear in the Mustang's gaze, only awareness. Recognition, a kind of agreement that required no ownership. The wind caught the horse's mane, flaring it like a flag before he slowly turned, muscles rolling beneath his coat, and trotted off into the wild. Not running, just choosing. Cole watched him disappear into the grass and whispered, "Thank you." Later, back at the station cabin, June sat on the porch steps, Wren curled at her feet. Cole joined them, handed her a cup of strong coffee. I saw him again, he said. June looked at him, unreadable for a second, then simply smiled. Yeah, you would. They sat together as the sun dropped, casting long gold bars across the horizon. June leaned her head on his shoulder. You think he'll come back again? Cole looked out into the deepening dark. No, I think he already did what he needed to do. And somewhere in the distance, the cry of a hawk broke the stillness, wild and proud. Sometimes healing doesn't come from hospitals or headlines. It comes from the wild, from a moment of quiet grace when we least expect it. In Cole's story, it wasn't strength or training that saved him, but trust in something untamed, something bigger than himself. And maybe that's a reminder for all of us to stop trying to control everything and start listening more to the silent things that guide us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever experienced a moment that felt like a quiet miracle? If you believe God places help in the most unexpected places, type Amen in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow this channel for more real stories of love, survival, and redemption. God bless you and everyone you hold dear.